that.
Ilya, hi. Thank you for an opportunity to talk to you, for your time. And an idea is to discuss with you some sides of, uh, like, you know, biotech is like extremely complicated area. And I wanted, with your help, to develop some understanding of its edge now and core, drivers there, core questions, and some insights how this, area differs from space as purely engineering, like, space or electric cars or whatever, where there is no such complexity as a biological layer. So, and I think it's logical to ask you to introduce yourself and tell your background. I remember you shifted from chemistry background into biology, and also tell about your VC fund, what and how you do, and also feel free to maybe to explain how my readers, my viewers could be helpful for you. So nice. Let's talk.
Hi, Victor. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to speak about biotech. I am biochemist by training with the background in enzymology and protein engineering. I started my career in a computer-based drug design startup founded by Michael Levitt, who won Nobel Prize in chemistry in 2013 for molecular modeling. After that, I was organizing a laboratory for recombinant protein production. And starting from 2010, my career pivoted drastically. So I transitioned from the almost basic research, at least academia research, to pharmaceutical R&D. I started with scouting for projects all over the world, bringing them to the pharmaceutical company and making drug development, basically. So I was responsible for a couple of neurodegenerative projects, a couple of oncology projects, so making clinical development plans and assessing the projects in terms of investment opportunity. And
why did you shift from like the basic research into something else, by the way?
I was looking for new opportunities, and it happened so that the people in this R&D company were to become a scientific expert in this pharmaceutical field. Prior to that, I never thought I would be involved in the pharmaceutical development. It seemed to me too practical. I thought I would be a basic scientist probably all my life, publishing articles and all that. But when I started to do pharmaceutical R&D, I found how exciting it was, that you see the results of your work very quickly, and it's very rewarding. But at the same time, I had to learn a whole lot of things. So I never imagined how complex this was. All those
Ilya, I have lost you. Looks like something with the internet.
So yeah, I found this is an exciting field to be in, and I never regretted that. I made this transition. And eventually, starting from 2012, we began as a team to invest in the biopharmaceutical startups. We considered projects from all over the world, mainly from the United States, but also from Europe and other parts. And eventually, we invested in 11 North American startups, 8 of which went public on NASDAQ with our participation. So it was a pretty good success rate in terms of initial
how
public
long it took
offerings.
from investment to exit, like just how many years?
I would say the average would be 2 to 3 years, but there were exceptions. Some companies are still private from that fund. Some have gone public very quickly. So we typically invested in the last private round before IPO. And the most successful company, I will tell you about that. It is TransMedics. It grew in front of our eyes from 250 million to more than $3 billion company. And they are transforming the field of organ transplantation. They have built a device to transport the organs in a warm state. So the heart is beating, the lungs are breathing, and the organ lifetime is extended substantially with this technology.
But it's not pharma.
And
it's kind of a biotech, yeah. So it's not pharmaceutical.
It's a device company, so it's an exclusion within our portfolio. Typically, we invest in pharmaceuticals, but this is a device company. But being a transplant device, it had a scrutiny in front of the FDA, and there were very long and difficult advisory committees at the FDA to get this approved. But eventually they had succeeded, and now they are already out of available jets in the United States, I mean private jets. So they are buying their own airplanes to be able to deliver organs anywhere in the US, and now expanding to Europe as well. So this is, yeah. The next story was that we started to manage a hedge fund, investing in publicly traded companies, mostly in the field of cell and gene therapies, but not limited to that. From that fund, we invested in more than 40 companies, and 10 of them were acquired by big pharma. One is Spark Therapeutics, for example, which is one of the first approved gene therapies in the US, an ophthalmology company. So we started at the time when advanced therapies were still in their very early days. In 2017, just before the approvals of CAR-T therapies, of Spark and others. And it's this cell and gene therapy space and the advanced therapies as a whole is still very early. They're in their infancy. So it's exciting to be in those days where when we can make a lot of impact here. We are trying to select the best projects in the area and support them with invested money. So that's why I'm interesting to. It's interesting for me to address to all the listeners and readers, because we provide our expertise in this area, more than a decade-long expertise, both on the science side and on a financial and business side of the things. So you can invest together with us, or we can advise or consult anything
by the way,
related to the.
Do I understand right that you shifted to hedge fund strategy because, unlike to tech companies or deep tech companies, pharmaceutical companies get public early, so it's it's like late stage investing into tech companies, which is not truly available for many people. But in your in your industry it's possible. Like for anyone, you just need to have that understanding and.
Right. This is very similar to VC, to a typical VC, but with the public companies. So the process is mostly the same. You assess the scientific plausibility of what the company is developing, their preclinical and clinical data. Those companies, you're right, they are very far from the market still. So sometimes
I mean, they are
at the
public, but
preclinical stage,
may not have revenue. Yeah.
right?
Okay. Okay.
They are not profitable at all, and they will be probably profitable like 5 or 7 years later. So their value depends on the results of their future experiments, collaborations, performance of the team. So that's what we are assessing. And we try to find underestimated companies, undervalued companies with the potential to grow substantially. But the private market is still more attractive to us because the public companies are very much influenced by the macroeconomics, the politics, and they are very volatile. So sometimes they can drop like 40% with no internal reasons. The data are good, the team is okay, but something said by the prime minister or some president candidate may drop down their shares substantially. So we prefer to invest in private companies. They are valued a bit less, and you can do very thorough due diligence on them, including the primary documentation. And also, which is very attractive to us as people who developed pharmaceuticals with our own hands, we like to be involved in the life of the company, and we like to have a hands-on activity to help them with their strategy, to help them decide what would be the best indication, what would be the best clinical development plan. So that's a very rewarding activity compared to just assessing the companies from the public market.
Okay, and like, is there any kind of typical maybe profile of like a successful founder in pharmaceutical and or biotech? Like, is it possible maybe to generalize what kind of people, or maybe even if it's possible, maybe you can, are there any kind of people like Elon Musk in your like in biotech? I mean, is it possible to talk about this area in this way or not?
I don't see any reasons why not. But thinking about your question, I couldn't come up with any single person who you would compare with Elon Musk.
And why? I mean, it's for example, in Tesla or SpaceX, there is no scientific risk, so it's like purely engineering risk. And I mean, is it possible at all to have somebody in such complicated field to go that long-term way, like in more engineering fields, or it's like impossible by definition?
The closest comparators, I would say, would be venture investors like ourselves. So, for example, Noubar Afeyan from Flagship, who is the founder of Flagship and who is a man
I've
with
seen
very...
him once. I've seen him once in some old life. I've seen him on the board of some on the board of advisors of some institution, which I don't want to mention.
Yes, and he is a very long-term horizon person. So he tends to build the startups, really transforming the field, which leads obviously to a lot of failures, but sometimes successes. By the way, TransMedics, which I mentioned, was a flagship company, and Moderna, who everybody knows now.
Yeah, I remember the guys suffered a lot and tried to commercialize it for like drugs for pets, but eventually that pandemic came and they like, you know, it was enormous. And so, I mean, do I hear you right that Noubar does a portfolio construction? I mean, it's not about that you took one specific tech and you work on it. He rather constructs a portfolio. Like, I don't remember. It's like he did like in 20 years, like 100 companies, something like this. Yeah. So it's like,
Yeah, that's correct. Yes, constructing portfolio, it's called venture building. It's the most advanced model of venture investments, where this is what in our field Flagship is doing, Array Capital to some extent, Atlas Venture, Third Rock Ventures, and all the founding and managing members of the team. For example, Peter Kolchinsky from Array Capital or Bruce Booth from Atlas Venture. They are really, I would not say comparators with Elon Musk, because they are more narrow focused than Elon, but their vision and their expertise in the area is extremely broad, and everything they say is worth regarding very seriously, and these are all very insightful things.
okay. And then do I understand you right that these guys who did that Cambrian beer, guys who did you have a look on them, yeah, or no?
Yes.
They try to basically reproduce that approach, but with sole focus on longevity, right? So they still construct portfolio of a specific companies, and they try to go them through the funnel of let me share maybe screen, you know, like so it's like you know, like they construct a portfolio of longevity focused drugs as they believe, like related to longevity, possible longevity hypothesis, yeah. And so they go with full clinical stages, right? So I now understand what they're talking about. It's like it's not about something like one thing, and we believe, but you know, still portfolio, right?
Yes, they act like an umbrella for multiple companies with different indications, different molecules, and those companies can be separately acquired by large pharma companies, right? They can separately change their strategies. So it's a good approach, and it's very flexible. The only thing it requires, the extremely long investment horizon from the part of the investors. So the investors should not expect quick returns. Like it's not 7 or 10 years plain VC fund. It's more like 20, 30 years horizon.
And
With a lot of
Noubar with Flagship, it's a similarly long horizon or not?
Right. Yes, exactly. That's why I mentioned him in the first place. So with a lot of failures down the road, so not too many investors are prepared for that. This should be some, I don't know, visionary investors like Bill Gates or other high net worth individuals passionate about science and these novel developments, or institutional investors like, I don't know, Norwegian pension fund with extremely long horizon and larger assets under management.
Okay, and could you maybe, you know, there is like a thing like, you know, Eroom's law, so-called Eroom's law. You know, let's assume that these data are, you know, correct. So it's about an idea that there is some decline in return on investments into basic research in pharma and biotech. And it's kind of like, it's called Eroom, unlike to Moore's law. So like Moore's law, it's something like abundance, AGI, whatever. And here we have, so why? So I mean, does it look like true chart, or maybe it's like just some kind of misunderstanding. Is it correct chart or not?
Yes, it's perfectly correct, and many sources support the correctness of this
And
data.
so then, as an industry insider, why such sustainable long-term trend we observe? Like it's for United States, but still, why this happens?
First, because it begins more and more costly to develop novel drugs. Probably one of the reasons is because all the low-hanging fruits are already there, so have already been picked up. And the development of novel drugs demands novel targets, novel approaches, novel methodologies, novel instruments, and modalities. And without constant development of the entire basic infrastructure, it is impossible to generate novel drugs with the same pace as before. So all the large indications have been already serviced to some extent. So if you have myocardial infarction or you're at high risk of myocardial infarction, you take statins, which was a blockbuster drug for statins were blockbuster drugs for some time, for a decade probably. After that, the blockbuster drugs became autoimmune antibodies against autoimmune diseases like Humira or Remicade and others. So large autoimmune populations with rheumatoid arthritis or ulcerative colitis were serviced by those drugs. And now, after those large indications are already served by the existing therapies, only smaller niche indications remain, which requires much more investment to explore and to find novel approaches to target them. But here you can see that starting from 2010, and this trend continues, this graph begins less steep. Its slope begins becomes less steep. Probably
so there is some kind of stabilization, and like
right. Probably for several reasons. First, novel modalities were discovered and are actively explored now. As I mentioned, cell and gene therapies, RNA therapies, novel ways of targeting the proteins or genes in our organisms. Now gene editing comes to fruition already. Second, the pharmaceutical companies have become more flexible. They are actively involved in basic research, in making accelerators, creating partnerships with early stage biotech companies, investing as venture capital arms into early stage biotech.
By the way, if correct me if I'm wrong, I did some, in spring I did some research in longevity space. For me, it looks like big pharma totally avoids anything related to longevity. Why?
So now we are switching to another part of our conversation.
Okay, finish, but then shift, like
longevity space. From the practical standpoint, developing drugs against longevity is a nightmare, because to prove correctly that the drug prolongs life, you need to observe large cohorts of patients for like 20, 30, or 40 years.
You mean you need to observe to really understand, or to prove it for FDA? Like, I mean, or just really basically understand?
Both. The FDA is a very reasonable organization.
But they are not too conservative. They do not like delay progress.
No, they are extremely supportive of any innovation now, and sometimes too much so. For example, many experts do not agree with the FDA regarding the Duchenne muscular dystrophy approval of gene therapy by Sarepta. Anti-amyloid antibodies in Alzheimer's disease were approved. Many say with the lack of substantial efficacy and safety evidence. So sometimes they are too receptive.
So we cannot talk about FDA as a bottleneck for progress. I mean, it's wrong, right?
Right now, it's wrong. It used to be in early 2000s, and since then, this notion remains. But I wanted to mention that some FDA divisions are more conservative than others. For example, I've heard that psychiatry division is very conservative, or gastroenterology division is conservative. But with regards to cell and gene therapies, oncology,
Okay, understood.
Rare diseases, they are very receptive. For a scientific community, you need to prove that some approach in the longevity field is really working. We don't have biomarkers yet, good biomarkers of aging.
Yeah, I know. I've seen that there is like for 10 years, there is a extremely huge consortium of researchers started at Harvard and so on, like I don't remember, like at least hundreds of people working for 10 years just trying to figure out markers of how to measure it against any other like it's just
Right.
10 years just to just 10 years just to get people together to work on this problem, and they developed like after 10 years, they have kind of just like a roadmap how we will,
You're right. It is. It has the one main reason. It is extremely complicated field. So we, as a humanity, could not come up still with universal therapies against cancer or neurodegenerative diseases.
I hear you. I hear you. So
or even cough.
I hear you.
Right?
It's like pharma works like, it doesn't touch complexity of genes generated algorithms. It just targets mechanistical features of, of a body, of types of illnesses, and approaches each one like specifically, mechanistically, not about like solving like some universe management system,
yes,
like elongated, right?
Because before approaching the overall complex problem, the next level of complexity compared to individual diseases, you need to have tools good enough to perform gene editing or any other complex intervention.
I call it enablers. Of progress.
Yes, right. We don't have enough precision tools for gene editing, and we don't know which genes to edit in the first place. This is all still in the basic research area. So there is Altus Labs, right, which was created by ex-big pharma and scientific people and industrial and investor community people with huge combined expertise, and
lots
they
of money,
are working on it. So
like billions of dollars.
Right. So you cannot say that pharma is not interested and is not working on that. They are doing exactly the right thing. Before starting some clinical program, just imagining out of the blue that, I don't know, mitochondria are responsible for longevity, so we need to target mitochondria. You need to first understand the basic mechanisms and principles behind the longevity process and the aging process. And this is not still done yet. Why? I like to compare it with oncology. Why do we see such huge progress in oncology? Because starting from 1950s, the institutions, the network of institutions around the United States and then in Europe were created to tackle the basic mechanisms. That's when the DNA structure was discovered. Then all the molecular biology instruments were discovered, like PCR, gene sequencing, single cell approaches, imaging approaches, protein chemistry, and all those things we use now. They were developed during the second half of 20th century, and this gave results only by early 2000s. So between 70s and 90s, we have seen almost no progress in oncology. And between 19s and 2000s, we eventually see some progress, and now it's going more and more, but not in all indications. It's still a huge problem, but we understand a lot more about the interaction of tumor, immune system, and organism than before, obviously. This is not done in the field of brain research, for example. It is being done now,
You mean
but all the
you
attempts...
mean that Parkinson and Alzheimer, right?
And Alzheimer's, yes, where all the attempts to treat Alzheimer's were like a blind puppy attempts to escape the room, because everything that was tried was discovered even either by chance or tested on mice, and mice isn't a relevant model for Alzheimer's disease.
Why
So, the practice shows so. So
you
we
mean conversion rate from positive
yeah, it's
results
zero.
from mice, then when you move to humans, conversion rate is small. You mean that? It's like biological difference of, probably, genetic code set up, right?
Right, of course. It's called translation rate. It's very low. In Alzheimer's is almost zero. In oncology, it's much higher. We have now humanized mice. We have mice with xenograft tumors that are tumors taken from humans and injected into mice. And you can test all kinds of therapies there. It's not ideal, far from ideal. It's still, you can call them furry test tubes, they call them sometimes. But still, it's better than nothing. And you could cure mice with Alzheimer's in early 2000s. Everything, almost everything worked on them. I personally tested the one drug on mice with the model of Alzheimer's, and they begin to do the mazes very quickly. Their memory improves dramatically, but it doesn't translate to the human situation at all.
So let me ask you, to understand you right, that as we have no any kind of even markers of aging, it's absolutely possible to try to predict, when and what and how could be solved, maybe a bigger trend. I mean, well, as you said, in oncology in 70s to 90s, there was some development of both theoretical understanding and enablers, and it resulted after 20 years. Could you maybe talk about longevity thing? Your opinion as of now, I said it's personal opinion.
Of course. Of course, the biomarkers, there are a lot of biomarkers out there, but the problem is to validate them. What means to validate a biomarker? You need to observe large cohorts of people again for like 20, 30 years and show a statistical correlation between the level of biomarker and the mortality eventually. So the ultimate goal, mortality and quality of life. Ultimate goal is to improve quality of life and to improve survival. Until you validate those biomarkers with these endpoints, the biomarker cannot be called a validated one. So it requires a lot of efforts. And as far as I know, there is no systematic approach to this validation. There is a huge difference between validating biomarkers retrospectively, that is taking the measurements from the existing cohorts of people and trying to understand who lived longer with which biomarkers, right? And between retrospective and prospective validation of biomarkers. Prospective validation is the ultimate proof that this is a real biomarker. Again, comparing this to other fields of medicine. For example, does computer tomography, CT scan of the lungs predict lung cancer? Is it useful for screening to find a lung cancer? There were huge debates around that. And the ultimate answer is for a broad population, for screening, no, CT scan is not useful. And this required huge amount of research to find out that it is not useful in the broad population. Same with any other diagnostics and biomarkers. You need to prove its usefulness. What if methylation? Take for example methylation. It is
okay.
a very
Methylation is like
popular
it's what called epigenetic clocks, right?
Right. It is a very popular biomarker nowadays. How
Yeah,
can we be
it's so
sure?
popular. I mean, it's so popular. Let me ask you, as we are here. So Brian Johnson even established the Longevity Olympics, and they focus all their endeavors, gene therapies, experimentally he tries, and other things, and they optimize for that epigenetic clocks measure. And I've seen that some times ago there was a paper. Guys demonstrated that it's like inflates, like I mean it's just inflated correlation. So I mean it's you cannot rely on that. So you can I'm not that deep into this, but what I understood is that if you rely on that marker, you will falsely self-convince yourself like you are doing something useful, but actually like if you try to just to switch off this marker and try to substitute by any other things, you will be like misled. So I mean it's so maybe a radical biohacking from this point of view, even as you say, you have not established a market. It was like it's popular in longevity community, and especially guys which believe like that cell reprogramming approach, like by Yamanaki factors, like so they rely on that. But what if I do biohacking and after some time I realized that this marker was wrong? So it's like, how dangerous is what Brian Johnson does for himself and friends? I mean,
it can well be. There are again multiple examples when early stage research on several dozens of patients showed a great benefit of some drug, be it oncology or respiratory disease or anything else. And then when people try to replicate this in large late stage trials, double-blinded and placebo-controlled, they found that the drug not only didn't improve the well-being of patients, but even harmed them.
And why this happened? Why this happened? So you do 1,000 sample of people, and on a bigger population, it's wrong. Why this happens? Like
because early stage trials and especially individual cases are misleading. People are inclined. There are multiple reasons for that. People are inclined to believe in their approach. So it.
I mean, it's bias towards own. You spend lots of time and efforts on this, and you self bias, right?
Right, exactly. And this is part of the problem with the publication. There is an apocalypse of apocalypse of irreproducibility.
I know.
So much so much scientific papers do not reproduce when you try to reproduce them in a lab. 20 to 25%, according to some research, are not reproducible at all.
I heard that now in some frontier pharma and biotech fields, you cannot reproduce even half of the published results. I heard that's, I mean, editors accepted papers, but when outsiders try on the edge, they cannot, and they are extremely disappointed. Like, how is it possible you see major journals and you cannot rely on it? Like immunology, I heard that works that way. Like, okay.
Absolutely, this is a huge problem. And going back to the irreproducibility of the early trials in late stage trials, the blinding of the patients is extremely important. Not only of the patients, but of the staff as well, of doctors and other medical staff. It's what's called double-blinded trials.
Doctors also should be not, not to have any kind of bias within their practices. I don't know, you call it indications.
Yes. Of course, because especially those who measure the well-being of patients, they can be biased to a very high extent.
I understand. It's like, you have something not working at all, and you have something which may show, and you like overestimate this. That's complicated area. And by the way, I guess you observed that space, but we hear AI, I mean machine learning. So how valuable it was like for progress in pharmaceutical and biotech, from your opinion, how it was useful as of now, and maybe some forecasts for future. I mean, how we can rely? I mean, for example, can I invest into it as a VC? I mean, does it make sense for me? I mean, enablers. I mean, like in progresspunks investment stages, but still, I mean, is it worth making some part of a portfolio betting onto like AI drugs, how they call it?
It makes sense, especially if there is a differentiation, because there are so many enablers right now. There are very established companies already providing this as a service. For example, Schrödinger, I'm sure they're using some AI approaches. This is a useful tool already. So now nobody, I would say the majority of the companies within 5 to 10 years will be using some sort of AI. This is obvious. It's just a tool. To what extent was it able to transform the pharmaceutical industry to date? Not too much. The hopes were always higher
than the actually delivered.
Than the reality, yes. So many hoped that in the matter of several years, AI would transform the attrition rate, that is the rate of failure of novel pharmaceuticals, from like 90% to something like 50%. That would be a great success. But in fact, so far, we don't see the indications of this. There are a couple of dozens clinical stage AI-generated compounds, and they constantly fail. They don't show so much success as for now. Of course, AlphaFold story is a huge win for the industry. This is about protein folding modeling. So now you can model like hundreds of millions of proteins in silico. And before that, it was a very cumbersome procedure of understanding how the proteins are folded and how
I remember there was a guy David Shaw, which did like one of the first quantitative hedge funds in like maybe end of 80s. And in 90s, Jeff Bezos worked for him. And in like early 2000s, Shaw shifted, he had biological background and he shifted towards solely this problem of protein folding, but he did for 15 years, but without machine learning. I mean, they tried to solve it like in traditional way. I mean, I heard about this, like how big problem it was.
Yes, and it is still, because AlphaFold hallucinates like all LLMs, but it's still a huge success in the field, because it's much easier now to find the structures of
But
proteins.
it's still kind of like, as you said, it's like will be part of the stack of companies, but it's like enabler, but not like a thing which solves, basic research problems by itself. I mean, just one of the tools, and not about that. Is it possible with AI to to get like I've heard recently Noubar Afeyan, he said that for him AI is like pattern extrapolators. So, and he said that it's not about creativity, it's about like, and so that's just pattern recognition by machine learning. Will it be like, is there a chance like for example, like AlphaFold? I mean, it's many AlphaFolds happen within subdomains of biology. Will it result in like
to have a similar success in the entire field, you need much more data, much more clean data, because the existing data sets are extremely dirty and garbage in, garbage out. And there are not very numerous. Why AlphaFold succeeded? Because there are millions and hundreds of millions of data points out there with protein atoms, their positioning, and all that, and with proteins themselves. Hundreds of thousands of protein structures, real protein structures, acquired via X-ray or cryo-EM or other approaches. In the field of molecules testing, especially human clinical trials, you have tens of thousands points at best.
how
And
many
this
how much
tens of thousands, probably more and more for now. The big data has a potential to transform that. So compared to early 2000s, probably there are more data points by 2 orders of magnitude. This is a good thing to analyze, but still they are extremely dirty. They are hidden inside the pharmaceutical companies, so primary documentation is not accessible, and it's probably available source of information, and to train the models, the AI models. I think in the future it's possible, but it will require a lot of efforts, and it's not a matter of 5 or 10 years. It's like closer to 20 to 30 years from now, when we start to see AI generated drugs succeed in late stage clinical trials. You need to have certain statistics to see them succeed better than traditional drugs, so to say. But eventually, I don't think there
still people maybe not that like people do not do that much of compute as machine learning, but they have still that some special insight into reality. You mean that entire approach should demonstrate that it creates value in comparison with like AGI by live people, yeah?
Right. Right, because there are so many steps involved in the decision making when you bring a drug from the discovery to the market. The first one is target what you are targeting in the organism, to what extent it is relevant. It is AI may be very useful in this respect in the target identification, and there are a lot of efforts already. Then comes the generation of the molecule itself. AI is working on that very actively. It's already used quite widely. Then decisions around the indication, patient population, how to conduct clinical trials, how to what to test, and so on and so on. Many decisions at each of this point can lead to a success or failure. So people are trying to figure out how to leverage AI in all those respects. And there are some pieces of the puzzle already out there, but it's still not a smooth workflow to apply AI to. So a lot of work has to be done yet. As I said, the cleanness of the data is probably of paramount importance here.
Understood. Interesting. Okay. And well, actually, I'm somewhat disappointed and somewhat surprised, but I mean, it looks like I consciously had some expectation that you are as a extremely down to earth and critical. Maybe you may, like, if you will see some optimism in longevity, but no, it looks like no, not. And uh, if you like, for example, if you will be like me, like if I want to impact progress by investing into startups like software or maybe some kind of deep tech enablers for like tools which scientists work with, or I don't know if there is a like term engineering in pharma, probably not, like basic science, or maybe some commercialization, whatever. So what kind of maybe important bottlenecks these startups may try to attack? Like, so I hear you that it's like 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, like from 70 to 90, but maybe if talk about something more short term, like software startups. So like what would you like prioritize? Like it's just personally for me, because I believe that enablers are, if you have some enabler and it distributes its either out some kind of automation or incomparable scale, some kind of best practices. I guess that like in any field, there are like really competitive companies and people, and they always experiment with best practices. So they try, and if it works, they use it, and we impact that progress. So like maybe what for you personally would be like areas or bottlenecks or problems, like, or enablers to help, like just kind of brainstorm. No, it's not that thorough thinking like you do on your drug investments. No, it's more general question.
Yeah, but I constantly meet the problems in the area of cell work and cell handling. There are so many single cell technologies out there right now. So we are more and more capable of discerning what the single cell is doing, how it is different from the other one, and how does it all work in dynamic, because it's very important, the time dimension, right? And still, despite all those great technologies out there, there is a lack of automation, as you said, in this area, and lack of, I don't know how to put it, probably the complexity in this field is too huge to be understandable by human mind. So I would love to see some instruments which would adapt this complexity to us humans, for us to be able to understand it and to use it for as a basis for our decisions. Does it make sense?
Yeah, I hear.
Because there are this is the first one. The second one is, as I said, there are so many data around there, and they are all very different. They are being collected by different parties, and they are different in nature. And the great achievement would be the unification of all the available information in some huge multi-dimensional database. But it's just a dream. I don't know how to achieve that or even approach that, because I know that a lot of companies have very robust proprietary data sets, and
You mean
combining
big
them
pharma?
together in pharma, in biotech, of course, for example, some biotechs are leveraging their access to, for example, oncology samples from a hospital. They say, we have access to a hospital with like 5,000 beds, and we have a collection of 1 million samples, and it's an important source of information about the cancer. Combining that with other relevant data sets would increase the usefulness of this data manifold. That's what would be very important for the industry. Another thing, as you said, yeah, time dynamics, taking that into account. This is important, and people are starting to learn that more about the cells and what is happening inside the cells at a micro level. For example, which is exciting for me. It is more of a basic science now, but it may become a druggable thing in the future. It is what happens at the level of molecular condensates. So the liquids in the cell, they behave not like real liquids. They are more like gels with different densities, and they do not mix with each other. And there is something interesting happening in those droplets. They are like micro reactors, and the surface is special for them. So there is a huge amount of thing happening out there. The same applies to the nucleus and how the genes are organized inside the nucleus. What is happening with their special organization. There are already several startups trying to do a translational work on that, but it's still in its infancy. So I think it's the next generation of complexity and understanding of what's happening in the organism. Another thing is if you could combine somehow the biology world and the tech world, for example, making nanorobots at a nanoscale, combining properties of proteins, DNAs, and I don't know, silicon-based or other material-based science to do the exact work. For example, why we don't still have robots able to discern a tumor cell from normal cell and to excise a tumor precisely.
You mean
from the
it's
body.
like that, a nanobot, so-called nanobots, yes? Something like
Yes. Still no progress. Seemingly no progress here. I think this is part of the future we will face.
I hear you. And okay, and maybe there are some like industry media or blogs or whatever which you follow, like which may allow me to understand better, like not that deep as you, but from the point of view like of these bottlenecks and problems and so on. May you suggest some, or maybe there are some opinion leaders which you like, Like maybe
Yes,
people like
there are.
think, you know, like I believe you understand what I'm talking about. When you work in some real science, especially world of atoms, it looks like people tend to be extremely down to earth. So the really good people, they are avoid of generalizations or even speculations. But maybe there are some people which like do some kind of a little bit bigger and cross-disciplinary view. Maybe if you know somebody would be extremely helpful.
Yes, the best one I can think of is Derek Lau. He is a medicinal chemist and many years blogger. His blog is at science.org and is called In the Pipeline. So he writes about anything related to pharma, biotech, and the medicinal chemistry and biology in general. And he touches upon a variety of themes, and he's very thoughtful and sarcastic. So I love to read him.
In the pipeline blog, right?
Yes. The second one, it is more probably down to earth, but still visionary enough and with good perspective from the venture side of the community. I already mentioned the Atlas Venture. It is Atlas Venture partner, Bruce Booth. His blog is called lifescivc.com.
Lifescivc,
Yes, and there is a weekly Twitter room called Biotech Hangout. Extremely useful. Yes, Biotech Hangout, but it's more news-oriented. But sometimes it's a very useful perspective on what's going on in pharma and biotech in general. So I love to listen to them.
In the pipeline, VC, biotech hangout.
Yes, yes, and also there is a person named Brad Lonkar. He's an investor himself, but now he's busy with his biotech TV, biotechtv.com. Mostly those are interviews with thought leaders, CEOs, scientists, prominent scientists in biopharma. So he took interviews from every big pharma CEO, I think, out there. So it's very insightful, and they are very friendly and talking with him in a very open manner. So I like to listen to that.
Okay, and probably one of the last questions. In tech, there is some tendency that big companies, they often shift towards value extraction and network effects and join their existing scale of businesses. And so that's probably why constantly startups were able to, you know, to do something new and scale it, and even scale it extremely big. So you understand that difference, like, so it's sometimes about motivation of people, like, you know, cultures of companies and so on. But for pharmaceutical industry, is it true or not? I mean, so is big pharma efficient enough, or it's more comparable to big tech in tech? Like, just your perception, opinion. I mean, or in other words, like, you know, like I don't know. I think it's hard for you to estimate, but let's try. So, is there a consistent value creation of new capitalization in pharma by startups or still by big tech? So it's how it works. Because startups make, like, there are some, for information, there are about 1,500 unicorns with combined valuation like up to $5 trillion. So I mean, it's of course, in comparison with extremely big tech, it's small. You know, like we have 7 companies for $10 trillion, but I mean, it's really material, like a lots of value created outside of big tech. And I guess, I hope, will be capitalize it. They will do IPO, or I will get exit. I you know, from my portfolio, I hope. But for pharma, how is it true or wrong, or it's impossible to talk in comparable terms?
It is possible. We constantly compare pharma with IT, for example. But talking about pharma and biotech specifically, pharma needs to create value inside or acquire it. It's their lifeline because of the Eroom's law, the price of creation of novel drugs and blockbusters raises constantly, and pharma faces patent cliffs. That is, their cash cows stop bringing money as soon as the generic or biosimilar enters the market, right?
It's 10 years
So,
or 20, or how long it's currently?
It's 20 years from the priority date of the patent. So it's usually like 10 years or less from the start of the marketing, because it takes time to bring.
So
Yes,
10
but
years.
there are extension mechanisms right now. For example, the patent bureau can extend it for additional 5 years or so, but it depends. Pharma needs to invent something to bring new blockbusters to the market. That's how it works, basically. It creates the value internally with their R&D divisions, with VC arms, and also acquiring other companies. So this derives all the investment into the biopharma
Okay, let me ask you
industry.
in other words. Is it impossible to imagine a world where all innovation happens inside big pharma? It's impossible. I mean,
it used to be so until late 90s, probably.
It was, but now not.
Yes. Starting from biotechnology era, it became possible for small biotechs to create innovation by themselves. And now half of the drugs entering the market are created within small biotechs, and half still in big pharma. But in many cases, as a result of the acquisition of a small biotech. So small biotechs play a huge role in this process. Pharma probably could acquire all small biotechs and begin to develop everything in-house, but constantly new biotechs are appearing at a rate of like 120 biotechs in the US alone per year. So it's a constant supply of new.
But I hear that if you have expired patent protection, I hear it's unlike to tech with purely competition between this. But I hear, okay, I think I need to think a lot about many things you said. But last question, it's just personally for me. I mean, how dangerous is it to use as a peak if you do not have straight indications? I mean, if I just want to look better and I do not have diabetes or what, how is it dangerous? I mean, is it possible to think about as an aesthetic drug, or it's too dangerous? Just your personal.
I would not recommend to anyone do it. To anyone without the indication, without increased BMI. But I know people who did that, and it was not dangerous for them personally. But it's a roulette. You need to assess this on a case-by-case
I mean, about long-term
basis.
implications. I mean, so it's like, if I'm just too lazy to eat less and do more sport, and I just started to use it, and like, is there any risk of like after 10 or 20 years? Like, I mean, because it attacks like extremely early, from evolutionary point of view, extremely early part of mechanics and DNA. I mean, it's extremely like, it was, majority of life. Like I think almost 100% of life on Earth, it was extremely evolutionary important to regulate that, like, you have to go for food. I mean, is it dangerous or not? I mean, because as you say, like you have to have a time to observe people, and you have a fraction of people which not have strong indications, but they starting to use before we collect that data. I mean, it's you would I hear you suggest to avoid, right?
Yes, I would say there is a small possibility of danger here. So nobody can exclude this. As a personal decision, I am against such decision. I am for sport and
I mean,
good
that
healthy
desire to do
eating.
like like a fast life hack. You just, I mean, it's
If you have money for Ozempic, you'll find money for a fitness room, right? And for
right,
healthy eating.
I mean, right, like, I mean, because it was like a kind of like a dream, you know, like you do not have to overcome your like that complicated way. You just press a button and enjoy. I mean, that I think it's extremely attractive for people.
Yes, but Ozempic comes with some unwanted effects. So gastrointestinal effects are quite frequent with Ozempic. And also, if you turn Ozempic down, if you stop taking it, there is a risk that your weight will revert to normal or above. And also, like I said, long-term implications are not studied yet. However, the history of using GLP-1 drugs is long. It's more than 20 years already. People started using them in early 2000s, diabetics specifically, but still the long-term unwanted effects are still not observed. So,
You
as I
interpret it
said,
as a relatively safe.
yes, the probability is low that something will happen, especially with the majority of people, I would say. So
Okay,
probably
I hear you. That like
it's
completely.
like with vaccines. It's like with vaccines. You can get unlucky, 1 in a million, and get an anaphylactic reaction to that. But it doesn't mean you don't you don't need to use it.
Okay,
But
I hear you. I hear you that some small, tiny fraction of population may have enormous.
yes.
I hear you.
Also, it seems that Ozempic doesn't only decrease the fat content, but also the muscle content. And you need to maintain the healthy muscle content to be overall healthy. So Ozempic is the first drug of such kind. There is also Mounjaro, which is better in terms of weight loss. And there are hundreds of drugs in development which would be better than Ozempic, I'm sure.
Maybe there will be a drug like which you just have a drug and your muscular percentage gets better. My dream. Sorry.
My dream is one-time shot for every disease. So
So you did some gene therapy and you enjoy it forever. Okay.
right, why not? Why already now there are some such gene therapies in animal testing, you know. It's not controlled enough, so it's dangerous, and everybody, for example, for extremely obese people, this may be a good thing to do
Okay,
instead
I
of
see.
Ozempic, right?
Okay.
So everything comes to a risk-benefit ratio.
I hear that. I hear that how pharma works. I hear. Okay, extremely interesting talk. Maybe I will follow up. Maybe I want to write a post. Maybe I will follow up with maybe some links or whatever. But overall, thank you so much. It was
I
much.
have,
Yeah.
yeah, there was an interesting question that you didn't ask. It is, what have I learned during all these years in pharma and biotech? What is my number one
Secrets.
takeaway?
Yeah, take away.
Yes. So I would say that the most the worst thing every developer and every person involved in pharma and biotech can do is over-promising combined with underperformance. That's why there are a lot of skeptics in the longevity field, for example, because longevity field has had a lot of promising, but underperformed so far. Less so with AI, but still as well. So we need to be very cautious. You want us to dream and to elaborate on the future. This is fine, as soon as you don't promise people to get a life-extending tablet in 5 years, for example, which was the case in many cases.
Yeah,
And
I remember. Yeah, people try to extrapolate, like even non-biological people like Kurzweil, like or degree longevity, escape velocity, or consensus within industry that longevity biotech fellowship did survey, and people expect like in 15 years we will expand by 5, and in 25 years we will expand like by 25. I mean, it's just like a consensus of like do I hear right? It's consensus of positively biased people, right? So it's like just wishful thinking. Like it's not actual prediction for a field where there's even no single theory.
Yeah, it's even a good thing if the people are honestly over-promising because they hope
No, I mean it's not about manipulation. It's about
yeah.
self delusion. Like
Yes, right. But there, as a consequence, there are a lot of people with the plain fraud and manipulation
oh yeah.
here. Of course, I think in the longevity field there are many people like that who just try to ride the wave and to gain money on that and nothing more.
I mean, there is that bias you cannot verify. You have some like I hear. Okay. Very interesting talk, actually. Thank you so much. Like,
Thank you, Victor.
I have to to integrate that. Bye.